Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the Tennis and Bagels podcast. I'm your host Andre, and I am here with the other host, Owen. Wow, for whatever reason, I almost forgot your name. Like Owen Lewis is here, even though your name is like literally right in front of me.
Yeah,
Uh,
and we've only known each other for like 3 years now.
just 3 years, just about 3 years. um, yeah, but fun thing about Owen, you might have noticed as well by the title of this podcast episode, is that he's here also as a guest today because it's just huge throwback to when we first started recording together. And Owen is now, well, first of all, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing well, thanks. Yeah, how about you?
I'm all right. I'm all right. Yeah, just a little
Yeah,
tired, but it's okay. I'm just been sleeping badly because I go to bed like at 2 a.m. playing games. But yeah.
you and me both. Have you told the listeners about the recent change in your professional life?
Not really, but I guess I am not working at Tennis Canada anymore. I did say that on Twitter, which I'm assuming that's mostly what the people come from, but I guess I should also be saying this here. So yeah, if you hear me talking a lot more badly about Canadians or just being a little bit more overcritical of them, that's why. It doesn't mean that I don't love them. I still love them all. I got to meet a fair share of them, in fact. So yeah. So, but now I'm free to say that Felix's backhand needs work. But yeah, that's essentially what this is. Um, but yeah, less about me and more about you, because Owen, as I said, it's basically playing a guest here today. He has wrote basically a full book, about 60,000 words, if I remember it correctly.
Yeah, I can probably check the word count right now, actually. Let me see. Uh, yeah, 63,000, let's see.
That's insane. Like I remember just like trying to write. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I have to do 6,000 words. How am I gonna pull this off? But anyhow, yeah. But this is a bit of a passion project for you. It's called the Golden Rivalry, about the rivalry of Novak Djokovic and Rafael Nadal, um, which I know for a fact is your favorite. So
Yeah,
yeah, how did you get the motivation to do this? Like, what pushed you into like writing this one?
that's a good question. I don't know if this is necessarily a good thing, but I think like most of my big writing projects are motivated by like difficulty in my personal life. So it was last summer, and I just wasn't doing very well. I kind of had some things going on that were like stressing me out. I was on a trip that was pretty stressful. But I did have a lot of free time, and so I was thinking like, you know what, Djokovic and Nadal are probably retiring soon. Djokovic maybe not because he's a cyborg, but um, like, and I figured that it was maybe a topic that people weren't going to cover that much because Federer and Nadal, like, all the narratives about that rivalry have been written to death. Federer Djokovic is kind of more on the outside, but Djokovic and Nadal in particular, I thought like people appreciate it, but I don't know if people would necessarily write books about it. So I was thinking like, you know what, let's write a book, and it will probably gas out in the middle, but let's take it as far as we can. And I don't I don't think the initial product was very good, but and what you read now you can judge for yourself, but I somehow got through it by the end of the summer.
Um, yeah, like in terms of like the rivalry, I also know for a fact that you also think that this is the best rivalry in men's tennis ever. But I think the differences between Djokovic, Federer and Nadal is that, like, number one, it's a lot closer than those two rivalries were. Um, and as a matter of fact, I think that there's just one win separating the two of them. Like Djokovic is at 30 and Nadal at 29, which is insane. And Federer and Nadal is just different in terms of like narrative. Like tennis wise, yeah, it was great at times, but I think mostly it was just like the mythology behind it that made it like special in that regard. Whereas like Djokovic and Nadal it became its own mythology after 60 matches essentially. Like they haven't played a 60 yet, but I guess it's because it's just such a long rivalry and so many grueling matches. Like at some point people are bound to pay attention and just kind of start looking
Yeah.
forward to those. Um, But in terms of that, since I'm actually like talking about like why did you pick this rivalry in particular? I want to hear from your mouth, because I said that you prefer this match over any this matchup, and you also think it's the best rivalry. But what do you think?
Yeah, so you hit on a lot of it right there. It's the most prolific of the big three rivalries, and it's the closest. I mean, 59 matches is nuts, and early on especially, it was pretty crazy. How often they were playing. I think 6 times in 2011, and another 6 in 2013. But by the end of 2013, I think they had played 38 times already, and that was 10 years ago. So it's kind of it's tailed off a little bit in the last few years, but they've still had some great matches. But I think what sticks out to me the most is just the sheer. It really is like unstoppable force meeting immovable objects, because neither of them have a major weakness, right? Like when Federer is involved, you know that whoever he's playing is going to aim at the backhand, and Nadal and Djokovic have worked out how to, unravel that shot pretty well. But with Djokovic and Nadal, that's not part of the equation. So they kind of just have to like go at each other until one of them breaks. And that results in these wild rallies, these long marathon matches, really, really like subtle and specific tactical adjustments, because neither of them has a major weakness. They both have all-time great defense, all-time great endurance. And so just as an athletic competition, I don't think there's anything that matches it.
Mm. Yeah. And in terms of like, is this you saying that because that's the reason why you think that's the best rivalry of all time, or that's the best rivalry between the big three in general?
Yeah, I think in terms of best rivalry of all time, I think you have to give that to Everett and Navratilova, because they played 80 times. Like that will never be equal. So statistically, that one I think is never going to be touched. But I think from an athletic standpoint, I think Djokovic Nadal is going to be really, really hard to beat. Like I think like we're actually seeing something sort of similar with Djokovic and Alcaraz now. With like I think some of their matches have that feeling to it. Like their Cincinnati final, especially the last few games of that, had that feeling of like just these two people pushing each other, who were already like the best, but pushing each other to even greater heights. But I think Djokovic and Nadal, like doing that over such a long period, as movement in tennis was improving. Djokovic's gymnastic feats are pretty well known, and Nadal is one of the fastest players ever on tour. And I think all of that combined, just, I don't know, you watch that and you feel like they could be successful in other sports as well sometimes.
Sure, yeah. And then I guess why do you think that's your favorite rivalry? Because I hear a lot of talks about you saying like how this is super athletic, and this sounds very fact based, but there are people who prefer all sorts of rivalries. Still, there are still people who prefer your worst nightmares in tennis, which is serve and volley and one-handed backhands. And those are subjective. So like in regards to that subjectiveness, like what do you think fascinates you the most about the Djokovic or Nadal rivalry? And that risk being the exact same answer, but whatever.
No, it's a good question. You were trying to get me to lose like all credibility here, because if the people listening know me, you'll know that I have like a lot of unpopular opinions, and that I sort of try to go against the consensus. So yeah, like again, you hit on some of the things. I don't like serve and volley. I like long rallies. The aesthetics of a one-handed backhand do nothing for me. But I think the biggest thing is just that like this rivalry was not as appreciated as the other ones. Federer and Nadal got all the appreciation and it was fantastic. Like from 2005 to 2009, they played so many great matches, like so many. It was amazing. Like, Rome 2006, Australian Open 2009, Wimbledon 2008 is the biggest one. Amazing. But after 2009, it really tailed off. And for kind of years and years after that, people were still like, oh, Federer and Nadal is, like God's gift to the tennis world. And during that time, there was like a better rivalry going on, which was Djokovic and Nadal. And I think also, if you know me and you're listening, you know that I really, really like Juan Jose Vallejo's tennis writing. And a couple of years ago, I found this website that he co-founded called The Changeover. And on The Changeover, he had written all these live blogs of Djokovic Nadal matches. and he went into like the tactics in a way that I hadn't seen before. It was much more specific. And Federer and Nadal, again, it could be great, but most of the time it just came down to like Nadal attacking Federer's backhand. And Nadal was up 23-10 at one point. And Djokovic Nadal, like I said before, was just much more of like an all court battle. And so I think I slowly started to understand that and slowly started to watch more and more of their matches. And as I did, I realized that they were sort of, I thought they were operating on like a higher level. So I think that was kind of how I became entranced by it.
Yeah. I guess I'm pretty sure you mentioned that, but like how long did it take you to finish this? Because I also hear from you personally that you try to watch as many matches as you could from this rivalry. So as you also mentioned, these are not short matches. These are normally very, very long ones. So how long did it take you, like maybe to the process of like saying, I have a finished product, even though the parts were not finally like edited at that point?
Yeah, so it took me about a summer, like I would say about 3 months. And I don't really think it was weird. By the time I got to the end, I did get to the end, but the feeling was more like, oh my God, I'm so burned out. I never want to look at this again, which is why I'm putting it out now instead of, a year and a half ago. Then like, wow, I finished it. But yeah, it was 3 months, which seems short as I'm saying it, but I worked on it pretty much every day, sometimes for a couple hours at a time. And yeah, I did rewatch every, like, maybe not quite every match. Like some of their more inconsequential ones, I might have just watched extended highlights, but I went through and I watched like so many full replays on tennis TV. And that was actually challenging at times because some of the matches are not as good as the highlights would suggest. Like one that people really like to say is one of their best is the Montreal one in 2013, which went to a final set tiebreak. And it is pretty good, but what people don't mention is that the first set and a half kind of sucked. Like Nadal comes out hot, but Djokovic is like all over the place. He's like double faulting 5 times in the first set. And in the second set, like it finally gets going when they play this epic point in the middle of the second set. Like Nadal hits his on the run forehands down the line, and Djokovic wins the point with like a forehand slice winner kind of on the run. And after that, it gets good. But that was only after like an hour plus, So there were a few matches like that where I was like, yeah, like this one is good, but it's maybe not as good as I thought it was, So that could get a little draining, but I did enjoy going back, and I caught a lot of moments that I wouldn't have caught from highlights. So I'm glad I did that.
Yeah, it's like I feel like it, even though it didn't rise to the level of Federer and Nadal, like in terms of like the fantastic aspect of their names, and as I said, like the mythology behind it. But I think because of the names of Djokovic and Nadal, they're still so big that you tend to remember their matches a little bit more flowery than they were actually in a way. So like there are many matches that are great, and obviously we watch so many highlights, and then we remember so many like great points that like we just tend to like project this to the entire match. But I guess you having watched whatever that would be like 60 plus hours of tennis, like watching all of this, yeah, probably more than that actually.
Maybe it's but it's such a great point you make. Like and I mean another one is like the 2012 Australian Open final. I see a lot of comments that are like, this is like one of the best quality matches of all time. And maybe if you watch the highlights, you would think that. But I've seen the whole match probably 4 or 5 times, and it's amazing. It's maybe the most impressive match I've ever seen from an endurance standpoint or a force of will standpoint. But the quality of the tennis is not very good. The first 3 sets are pretty forgettable, and the last 2 are amazing. If you want quality, you should watch the 2018 Wimbledon semi between Djokovic and Nadal, because that's 5 amazing sets. But so it is funny. Like sometimes I see these comments and I'm like, but I'm bad at articulating like arguments like this sometimes, and it's just like, my God, I wish that like I wish everyone had seen the full matches. So I'm hoping that's something I'll be able to get across with the book, like some like maybe some forgotten moments or some turning points that people wouldn't remember or maybe missed entirely from highlights.
How many chapters are there again?
So there are 33, but that's kind of a flexible number because some chapters are like if you've read my articles before, some of them can get pretty long, like, 3,000, 4,000 words. Some chapters are like that. Others are closer to 1,000. So if I have a really long one, I might break that into two, or if there's a really short one, I might beef that up. I might even add new chapters entirely along the way. Like, I haven't done this yet, but I think it might be fun to do some like top 10 lists, like top 10 best matches, top 10 best points even. And then I'd sort of write my rationale underneath. So I feel like that could be a fun bonus feature.
Yeah. And I guess because you were mentioning it kind of just like two questions kind of popped up in my head. First of all, like, what do you think it's your favorite match? The first one between the two of them.
I think it's the 2018 Wimbledon semifinal because, as much as I love the rivalry and as much as I try to talk it up, like, I think that was really their first like all-time great match. Like, particularly like in best of five. Up until that point, they'd played so many amazing sets, like hour and 20-minute, like best set you've ever seen type sets. Like, the 2021 Roland Garros semi, the third set of that, people freaked out about that set because it was amazing. And before that, it was the 2011 U.S. Open final, the third set of that. I think it was a similar reaction because that set was just like from the word go, it was incredibly intense, great quality, insanely close, 3 or 4 points that were just insane. But they couldn't really sustain it beyond a set or two because like no one could. The intensity is just way too high. You have to have a drop off after that. And I think that 2018 Wimbledon semifinal, they finally like sustained it over a full match. I think it being 2 separate days helped because you had that curfew in the middle. But yeah, something about that match from the very beginning, they were both on. It had momentum swings. It had incredible winners to errors ratio. They both hit 73 winners and 42 unforced errors, which is an amazing stat. I think going into the last game, they had won the same number of points. And then Djokovic broke at love to win the match. So he ended up winning 4 more points. Again, there are a few rallies in that one that I think you can put up against pretty much any. I think it has everything. And it's a shame that it kind of went under the radar because it was a semifinal. It was broken up into 2 days, but I think that's by far their best.
Yeah, there's definitely one of the matches that I hear the least about. Like, I feel like in terms of semifinals, even the Madrid 2009 was far more talked about than 2018 Wimbledon.
Yeah, it really was. And it's interesting because I think that 2018 Wimbledon match, like, that might go down as like the turning point in the GOAT debate for people who watched it. So at that point, I think Nadal had 18 majors and Djokovic had 12, and he had been 2 years without a major, right? So like this is his comeback because he goes on to win Wimbledon, and then he wins, basically doubles his major count over the course of the next 5.5 years. If he loses that to Nadal probably crushes Kevin Anderson in the final. He's got 19 majors. Djokovic has 12 still, but beyond that, Nadal gets a huge win against Djokovic on a surface that is not favorable to him. And Djokovic has the realization that, I played so well and I didn't win. And then maybe that has a carryover effect later in the rivalry. Like the next time they play, Nadal is going to have that edge in the big moments because he pulled out like this incredibly tight 5-setter. But no, Djokovic wins it, and like even though he was still like 5 majors back from Nadal and 7 from Federer after he won that tournament, that started something for him because he wins the next 2 majors after that. He wins 3 of them in 2021, wins 3 more this year. And it really all started with that match because the 2 years before that, they were 2 of the worst years in his career.
Didn't Djokovic say something along the exact same lines of what you said? Like, I played my best tennis, but still didn't win. Wasn't it like 2009 semifinal? I think you wrote that like in one of your recent ones, didn't you?
Yeah, thanks for catching that. Yeah, he did say that. He said, I'm trying to remember the exact quote. I think he said, yeah, like I played my best, and like I think the quote that sticks with me is like I even played a few points above my limits, and I still didn't win.
Mm-hmm.
And if you contrast that with what he said after the first time they played, which was at the French Open in 2006. So for those who haven't seen it, Nadal goes up 6-4, 6-4, and then Djokovic retires, I think, with a back injury. But in the press conference, Djokovic is talking about how Nadal is beatable, and Djokovic thinks that most of the points depended on him. And it sounded almost delusional to the people at the time. Like Brad Gilbert is like making fun of him on ESPN because like that was the natural thing to do. But clearly Djokovic saw something, and I think history has like borne that out that he was right. But yeah, but then that Madrid match is interesting to me because it's the complete opposite, right? Like instead of saying, I think I could have won, he's saying like, I played above my best and I still lost. So the fact that he had the mental fortitude to come back from that, and also the fact that, 2009 Djokovic is not prime Djokovic, but the fact that anyone can get him to say that, it seems insane given what he's gone on to achieve, right? But yeah, that was who Nadal on clay was. Like you would play your best and he would still beat you, and it broke a lot of players, but not Djokovic.
Yeah. About that, like that quote from 2006, I think this is like a bunch of things, because I believe he was 19 years old at that time.
Yeah,
he's a child, and
yeah,
it's funny to think. I mean, obviously he's like on legal age as an adult, but still, like 19 years of it is like such a young age. But it kind of strikes me as like two things, and obviously like in hindsight, but like I feel like it's a mixture of belief, the extrapolated belief in his own talent, and obviously like the fact that he does know that he is extremely talented, but also maybe the fact that maybe Nadal's game just kind of gives a little bit of that impression in some ways. Just because you're on the attack and Nadal's on the defense doesn't mean they're in control, which is like basically exactly what he ended up finding out over his next few matches on clay against Nadal. And I think that probably switched up a little bit of his belief, but he still believes he can beat Nadal on clay. He's done it, so it's not impossible. It's just really hard, and even Djokovic struggled massively with it. I think he has like a 1/3 of success rate against Nadal on clay, maybe less, like 7 out of
little less than that. I think. I think he's 8-20. So
something like that. Yeah, but yeah, it's pretty insane. Like I mean, you can. The comments are funny. Maybe that was a little bit of that's my feeling. That's maybe something that he didn't really notice. Maybe he noticed that he is good enough to like be on the attack. He didn't notice that Nadal is good enough to stay on the defense for a very long time. So, which he ended up finding out later.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And I mean, I think something that goes a little forgotten is that, especially since Djokovic has dominated Nadal on hard courts for the past 10 years, early on clay, it was similar. Djokovic didn't beat him on clay until 2011. So even though he ended up being right about those quotes, it took him 5 years. Yeah. It took him another 4 years after that to beat him at the French Open, and that was a diminished version of Nadal. 6 years after that to beat a better version of Nadal, right? So he lost the first nine matches against Nadal on clay. So it took a lot of time, and I think, so when he said like he is beatable, like he was right, but I think I don't know if he thought it would take as long as it did, because Nadal made it very, very difficult for him.
Yeah. The second question that I wanted to ask you is that because you mentioned 2013 Montreal, what do you think is the worst match that you've seen between Nadal and Djokovic? And like let's discount the ones that one or the other was clearly injured, because that's boring.
Right. That's a great question.
I think I know the answer to that one, but I'll let you think of it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'd love to hear your thoughts, because I have no idea. I think it's hard because a lot of their matches are great, and I think the ones where it's a demolition, because that happened a lot too, and that's why, like, I don't count it against the rivalry that there have been a lot of one-sided matches, because that's just what happens when two players are on that high a level. If you're off that little bit, you get steamrolled. And they were so good at peaking for the matchups that one does it and the other one does not peak, then you get like a 6-2, 6-2 or something like that. So those matches are spellbinding in their own way because, peak Djokovic on hard court, it's like video game tennis. Peak Nadal on clay, it's like probably the hardest player to beat in tennis history. So a demolition like the 2016 Doha final, Djokovic beats Nadal 6-1, 6-2. Nadal doesn't really do much wrong. I don't consider that a bad match necessarily, but that quality. So even though this is kind of similar to the Doha match, I was so personally disappointed by the 2019 Australian Open final.
I knew you were going to say that.
Because that was so hyped, and that's only their second match at the Australian Open and their last one. And the first one was that 6-hour marathon. So you're seeing highlights of that, like all through the lead up. Nadal looked great in his first 6 matches. They had just come off that amazing match at Wimbledon, so you had reason to think it would be close. I was hanging out with friends the night before, and they were like, "Do you want to sleep over?" And I was like, "No way! I have to watch this match." So I go home and I watch it, and it's one of Djokovic's best all-time performances. So again, it's spellbinding for that. But I think the headspace I was in at the time, I was convinced it was going to be a great match. At the time, I was kind of yet to fully come around on Djokovic, so I was like totally rooting for Nadal as well. He never breaks serve. He doesn't have a break point until the third set. The stat I think is the craziest about that match is I'm pretty sure he only hits 2 winners on Djokovic's serve the entire match. So like all points played on Djokovic's serve in that match, Nadal gets 2 winners in 3 sets. Like that's insane. The next time they played on hard court, Nadal gets 2 winners in Djokovic's first service game. So like that tells you how much trouble Nadal was having. I was just shocked. But what do you think?
I don't know. I was thinking exactly that same match, which is because like it's a match that Nadal just was so diminished, like in terms of like his play ability, just because Djokovic was so good.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I think it's always like a little boring. Like in particular for me, like I just don't really have, and that comes like the subjectivity thing again. But I just don't really see it like when the player is like really good beating out another player like just so dominantly. It's just kind of like if I want to watch a super high quality match, I'd rather have them both be playing really well. So yeah, like I mean, yeah, sure, like Djokovic played like an incredible match, and I also don't discount it against the rivalry. Is like part of the history of that they two have, and part of the beauty of tennis that we have different surfaces in which Nadal is able to come back the next year and completely destroy Djokovic in the final of Roland Garros.
Right.
So yeah, I think that those are the matches that are like the ones that I would count like for me is like the least memorable, like in that sense, just because it's like, yeah, they kind of just did what they do best, and it just ended up being like a routine in that regard. Like, I mean, they were worth titles that count towards their tally of like goatness in terms of like just a major, but match itself probably would be like, yeah, I guess losing player and fans probably would have liked to forget this match.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up that 2020 Roland Garros final, because that's the inverse, and you can say the exact same things about that match. Like, which it's one of Nadal's best performances, but it's also like Djokovic was bad, Djokovic was favored to win that match, which is insane in retrospect, given how it unfolded. But yeah, that one, it was supposed to be a war, a marathon. It was supposed to be like a great match, and Djokovic just never really showed up. He did break serve once in the third set, but he got blown out even worse in the first 2 sets, and like, I don't know, after about a set, like, yeah, you are marveling at the player who's in the lead, but you're also like, come on, like, you're waiting for the response, and in those 2 matches, it just never came. Yeah.
I think to your point, I would say like probably the 2019 final was worse, like in that regard, just because like I feel like Djokovic kind of pull off like some resistance in third set, but I think it was obviously too little too late. Like in that point, Nadal was already like way too high on his own adrenaline and his own like knowledge that like there's no way he's losing that match. even that set. So like brave enough for Djokovic to pull any resistance, but like Nadal just never really had a chance. But I think that I think I said like when I think we recorded an episode right after that match as well. In which I think I said like I feel like, and that's probably maybe a parallel that Djokovic maybe thought as well. Just like they were so ready to come out like against a player that will never give up. There's like I'm just gonna play 6 hours. I better like start like right off the gate like as best as I possibly can, and then they just kind of like just started running like so fast. And when they look in the rear mirrors, like where's the other guys? It's like it's like they barely left like the starting line. It's like, oh, okay, I guess it's gonna keep rolling then, like whatever. But yeah, like that's kind of like the feel I get from those performances that are so magnificent, and the other guys just like nowhere to be found, pretty much.
Absolutely, and you see that pretty frequently. Like we see it pretty much every time they play on hard courts now. We see it basically every time they've played at the French Open recently. Like even the one Nadal lost in 2021, he wins the first 5 games of that match, and he's like taking Djokovic to school, which is usually unthinkable. And you know, their one last year too, which I was lucky enough to be at. Everyone's like, you know, it's a coin flip. Djokovic was favored in that one too, but you think it's going to be like this titanic struggle, and then Nadal comes out and wins the first set 6-2 and looks like the greatest player alive, you know. So like they both know on a very, very like deep level that if they don't do that, then like at best they're gonna have to play one of those like 4, 5, 6 hour matches. So I think that's why they start so hot, is like there's just no room to ease into the match. And I think that's another thing that makes the rivalry unique. You know, like I think like when Federer is involved, you know that he's going to cruise on serve a lot, and there are going to be times when like he hits 4 backhand returns into the net. So you're going to have that easy service game. And you know, Nadal and Djokovic have improved their serves, so they're not immune to that, I guess. But with them, it's much more like you play a bad service game, you're going to get broken. You know, that other player misses first serves, and they smell blood. So I think that's why they've started like so hot out of the gates in a lot of their recent matches, because they understand there's just no space to like mess around.
And what do you think was you already said like you skipped a few of like bundle up a few of those into the same chapter just because they were like less consequential. But then on the other side of the spectrum, what do you think is the most significant match they've ever played? And I think I already answered the question, but like you can say it again if you want to.
Yeah. So I do think it's the Wimbledon one, but I think another good one is that 2012 Australian Open final, because I think that came at a really important part of Djokovic's development. He's just come off this amazing 2011 season. He's #1 in the world by a landslide. And in this match, and I should say the 2011 US Open, he's kind of just proved that he can do anything mentally, because he's down 2 match points against Roger Federer against serve, and he wins. But then you go into this 2012 Australian Open, and something's up with his endurance. Like even before the final, he's gassed against Leighton Hewitt in the 4th round, and then he's gassed against David Ferrer in the quarterfinal, and that was a straight set match. And then
and he lost a set to Hewitt, right? I think it was a 6-4 set to Hewitt, which is like, whoa, that is
right.
Unthinkable.
Like a grandpa Hewitt, who basically, like, no disrespect, he was a great player, but I don't think there's one thing he does better than Djokovic, right? So that was weird. And then the semi against Murray, which goes 4 hours and 50 minutes. I mean, there are times in that match where it looks like Djokovic might not be able to finish. He's in the second set, he's like gassed, and we see that much more frequently now, where he's like falling over after rallies. But we have to remember this is him at his physical prime. He was either 24 or 25 at this point. So you're seeing that, and it really looks like Murray was going to beat him, but Djokovic survives that match. And then the final is even more exhausting. And Nadal takes his best punch and survives the 4th set that he should have lost, and they're in the 5th. And Nadal is so much fresher, and he goes up a break. And then Djokovic somehow comes back to win. And I think, and that showed that he could do anything physically. And so I think that combined with the mental confidence from the 2011 US Open, that just sort of, I don't know. I think that established him as like the Superman of tennis. I think someone wrote that line after the match. And even though he like didn't win another major for another year after that, like he didn't do that well in 2012 by his standards. But I think that match was so important because if he had lost it, I don't think he would have quite the same aura and reputation that he has now. And then of course you have the numbers. Nadal gets another Australian Open. Like Djokovic, maybe that place doesn't become Djokovic's like home base anymore because he had only won 2 Australian Opens at that point. 2012 was his third. So Nadal wins that match. He and Djokovic are tied in Australian Open titles. And I think Djokovic still goes on to win more, but I think that could have potentially shifted the whole landscape. So I think that's another good submission for their most pivotal one.
Yeah. I think conversely, if you're talking like obviously rivalry wise, yeah, I would tend to agree with you, but player wise, I think maybe 2010 U.S. Open and 2020 Roland Garros were probably very important wins to Nadal in particular because 2010 is like completes the career Grand Slam, beats Djokovic, probably posts like the best season of his career or second best season of his career, and yeah, I think maybe that goes on to give him some belief that he can still win at the U.S. Open as well, which was basically at the time Grand Slam that people were always saying like Nadal is never going to win the U.S. Open, which was a real threat at that time. Was a real thought, like people, and especially because nobody really believed that Nadal was going to play over up to 37 years of age. So there's another thing, and I guess like 2020 just kind of on the same vein as well. Nadal, like, and I'm a lot older now at that point. Also a tying match from they want to tie with 20 Grand Slams apiece with Roger Federer.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that one also kind of goes on to say, oh, Nadal is still able to win and is still king of clay, as if there was any doubt regardless, but anyhow.
Right. Those are great ones. And I would also add the 2013 US Open final because that was similar to the 2010 US Open final. Nadal wins in 4 sets. But I think the key difference there is that came after Djokovic had dominated him in 2011. And so after that, you're thinking like, and Djokovic beat him in a way where it was like, well, how is Nadal supposed to adjust? Because he's just playing like this cyborg who has no weaknesses, who's defending as well as him, who returns better, serves better, is like doesn't need as much time to load up on the forehand. Like he was battering Nadal. And so I think, those 2013 matches now where Nadal beats Djokovic on hard court, I think they've sort of become almost like parodied by Djokovic fans because it's like such a great match. Like the last time Nadal beat Djokovic on a hard court, like 10 years ago, but they were really impressive. I think rebounding from 6 straight losses to someone 7 straight after the 2012 Australian Open final, and then coming back to beat them again on their favorite surface is pretty monumental. And even though Nadal didn't beat Djokovic on hard court again after that, he did survive another insane losing streak to Djokovic and came back to beat him multiple times on clay after that. I think that's really amazing. I think overall, just beating Djokovic 29 times is insane. I think that's one of Nadal's, that's near the top of Nadal's resume to me because Djokovic is, he's the perfect tennis player like we talk about, and he's a nightmare for Nadal on hard courts. There's a reason that Nadal hasn't even been able to take a set off him in 10 years. And so even though most of those 29 are on clay, the fact that he has beaten Djokovic 29 times, it's hard to put into words how impressive that is, I think.
Yeah. I think especially like if you keep Nadal as in like, yes, clay is a sanctuary, but like how much better Nadal still managed to be than Djokovic on clay, as to make the rivalry 20-8, as you said. Like, and yeah, Djokovic hasn't been beaten by Nadal on hard since 2013, but a lot of matches were a lot closer than a lot of matches that Nadal beat Djokovic in on clay. And yes, they pull each other like very, they push each other very far. But specifically at Roland Garros, it's hard to imagine that it's the one thing that I find that Djokovic is probably never going to be able to achieve in his career, which is like, it's just fine. Like, I mean, they don't have to be the absolute perfection of a player that's going to dominate every single surface like fully. But the level of dominance that Nadal ever had on clay is something that is even Djokovic obviously understands that this is one of the achievements of the century in any sports. Like it's not enough, I guess. Like now I would say that to put him as a GOAT player. Not that I want to like really revisit this debate too much, but like I would say that like just mostly just to say like I'm not claiming that Nadal is the best of all time just because he's incredible on clay, but it's definitely an achievement that like even Djokovic would have to like look at this and be like, wow, I don't think I would ever be able to do that.
Yeah, I agree, and yeah, I mean, you have all the crazy stats, but just in the context of the rivalry, Novak Djokovic, pretty much the undisputed GOAT of tennis, is 2-8 against Nadal at Roland Garros. He's at 20% win percentage across 10 matches. That tells you the level that Nadal is operating at that tournament. And I think the fact that Nadal was able to beat him there as recently as last year, a lot of people thought Djokovic was going to win that match. He had beaten him the year before, and Nadal beats him in a 4-set, 4-hour plus match in which he played better on the big points. And that does not really happen to Djokovic, as we know. So yeah, Nadal at Roland Garros is just the one puzzle he was not really able to solve. He's 3-1 against Federer at Wimbledon. He's dominated everyone everywhere, but Nadal at Roland Garros just he could not really figure that out. That win in 2021 I think was massive, even though Nadal's foot was kind of was a thing in the fourth set and really slowed him down. The fact that Djokovic was able to have even that much success there is pretty outstanding.
Yeah. And honestly, like some of the best matches that they played as well were at Roland Garros, even though Nadal ended up winning those, like 2013 semifinal coming to mind. But like, that's one actually that arguably Djokovic should have won. But context of matches and whatnot, again, 13 years ago. But yeah, it was extremely significant as well, I guess. But yeah. And I guess like just coming back to the book topic, what do you think was your favorite chapter to write of this rivalry?
That's a good question.
Or to revisit, if you will.
I will be honest, a lot of them blurred together because I wrote them so close together, but I think that a couple of them that have gone out already I really liked. I think, so the very first chapter, not the introduction, but the first chapter, I kind of focus on their 2008 Hamburg semifinal, which no one talks about anymore because it's been buried by so many more consequential matches and better matches, but that's one of their best. They're both so young. It's Nadal pretty close to his peak on clay, and they play some points that are amazing. It's sort of similar to that Wimbledon semifinal, and that it's like unrelenting high quality, which is pretty unusual. And so I really enjoyed revisiting that. And then one of the most recent chapters, I think either the second or the third one, I focused on that 2009 Madrid semifinal that we've been talking about a lot. That one was really fun to write. That's one of their best matches. The end is as good as any stretch of tennis you can find. And so I really enjoyed dissecting that, and also talking about the mental difficulties for Djokovic of playing above your best level and still losing. I think I hope that people will enjoy that one. I think there's a lot there.
Yeah, excited. When do you plan on publishing the last one again? I forget, like, what was your timeline?
So they're going out twice a week. It's Wednesdays and Sundays. If that starts to drag, I might start doing like 3 a week. But I figured like the off season would be a good time. And then I think after the Australian Open is kind of a dead zone for a while until the Sunshine Double. So hopefully in that spot when people have tennis withdrawals, this could be a cool thing to look at. But it'll be running for a few months at least.
Nice. And what was the most challenging one to write? The most challenging part of this book to put together, or chapter, or just maybe let's break this down into 2 questions. What was the most challenging part about like writing the book entirely, and what was the most difficult chapter to write, like just the most difficult section?
I think the most difficult section was the 2012 Australian Open final. I know I'll be revisiting that and making a lot of edits, because that one was just challenging because that match is so well known and so much has been written about it that it's hard to come up with a unique spin. So I will be spending a lot of time on that. And then the most challenging part of writing the whole thing was just the workload. Like it's not that different from writing articles. It's just much bigger volume. And so the hardest thing was just having the staying power to get to the end of it. I think when I listen to authors talk about writing books, like that's what they say is like the hardest part is just finishing. And in my experience, it was true. Like there are so many spots along the way where it's like, screw this, I'm tired of looking at this and I'm going insane. I would like to never look at it again. And that was kind of what I did when I finished it. Like I said, it's been a while since I got to the end. I'm kind of only putting it out now because I'm like, I mean, first of all, like I do think it's a good time to share it when I'm wrapping up their careers, but it was also like, I just didn't really feel like revisiting it. Like it wasn't in my head at all for a lot of the recent months. So yeah, I don't think anyone should look to me for writing advice, but I do think that's the hardest part. Like if you can finish, like, then, you know, you can make it sound better in the edits. It doesn't have to be good. I think getting to the end is the hardest part.
Nice. I had another question prep, but like I guess I got too inspired by you talking about that. Finishing a book, it's definitely like a challenge. Like you think about it all the time. Like, should I write a book at some point? But yeah, I think especially specifically speaking in terms of just the insanity that is just looking at the same product like over and over again. I think I used to do a lot of video editing, and it's definitely like it's driving me insane at times because you just look at it like, screw this, like just it's just going out the way it is right now. But yeah,
Right.
I think it's good that like honestly, like I think it's a great idea, at least like for an initial an initial publication of a book, I guess, like to release it like chapter by chapter, because then it kind of gives you time to like edit it one at a time and see how it goes and like see how people receive it and whatnot. And it's doing great so far. I've been reading a few. I'm lagging behind a bit, but I was just reading about the 2008 Hamburg semifinal. But yeah, it's a really good read so far, and it's definitely gonna be enjoyable during the off season.
Thank you. That means a lot. And yeah, like if you'd like to follow along, it's on Substack. The name is the Golden Rivalry. It's all free. There's no paywall. If you'd like, you can send me money, but there's absolutely zero pressure to do that. And yeah, I do think like I'm very unattached to the number of people who subscribe. So you can know I'm being honest when I say this. I do think the easiest way to follow along is just drop your email in there, and then you get them in your inbox at the schedules times. My hope is that people like start to look forward to new chapters and stuff. I'm hoping it sort of gathers steam as it goes along. But yeah, either way, like it's already written, so I don't really have to deal with like an emotional fall off if it flops horribly. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited like maybe like in the next 5 or 10 years, like when you're like more like developed in a career or something, or just decide to revisit it and just put up a publishing like physical copy of it, just like re-edited the whole thing. I think would be really interesting, and they're probably gonna redo the entire podcast at that point. But yeah, well, I guess go ahead, say.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I mean that would be amazing. It's incredibly daunting to me. So like another reason why I'm doing this in the format I am is like I just don't want to deal with trying to send to publishers, dealing with rejections, like all of that. So I was like, I'll just put it out myself, and if it like makes money, great. If it doesn't, that's fine. Like hopefully people like it. But yeah, that would be cool to someday get a physical copy.
Yeah,
that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, it's okay to start slow, and you wrote a book. I mean, there's a lot of people that can say that, but I can't say that, and there's a lot of people who can also not say that. So there you go. Like there's those few things that people can do in a lifetime. Have you planted a tree yet?
No, I need to. And if you wrote a book, I would read it.
Yeah, I'm thinking about like what should I even write about. Like finding the topic is definitely something. Yeah, as Owen just said, you can follow along on Substack, thegoldenrivalry.substack.com. Very easy to find, even if you forget, like the link is not any crazy complicated URL, that simple. You can also find the links in the description of this episode on Owen's Twitter account, which is at Tennis Nation. We're gonna tweet it out as well, like from the Tennis and Bagels podcast, which you can follow at Tennis and Bagels. And you can just thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for reading Owen's book as well. It means a lot to him. We'll see you guys around. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for letting me come on as a guest, Andre. And yeah, I should have said this much earlier, but yeah, I deeply appreciate anyone who takes the time to check this out. It does mean a lot.
Yeah, as much as I deeply appreciate anybody who has actually take the time to listen to this podcast as well. So yeah, thanks so much everybody for listening, and I'll see you guys next episode. Bye.